Hi, everyone that is joining us for this webinar. Just going to wait a minute or so before we get started as people make their way in. If you're joining us from across the world, please say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're coming from. Maybe it's an appropriate time of day to be enjoying a drink as well. Okay, just lots of people joining now, so we'll kick off in a moment. All right. Great. So welcome everyone to this webinar, part of our WSET Bitesize series. Today we'll be looking at the great variety Pinot Gris. My name is Sam Povey. I'm an educator working at the WSET School London, and I will be hosting this webinar alongside Vanessa Guébels, who is a wine educator based in France. And for those of you that are new to the WSET, we are the world's leading provider of qualifications courses in wines, spirits, sake, and beer. You can find our courses in over 70 countries, provided by a network of 800 course providers. But before I hand over to Vanessa, just to say that this webinar is going to be recorded and will be available to watch via the WSET Global Events Hub on YouTube. If you have any questions at any point during the webinar, please put them in the Q&A box, not in the chat, but in the Q&A box. We'll try and cover as many as possible. So to introduce Vanessa, Vanessa is the co-founder of Weeno. After 10 years of career in sales and marketing, she moved her professional career onto wine by following the WSET trainings and obtained her level 4 diploma in wines and spirits back in 2018. Vanessa opened her wine school in Marseille to share her passion. She started teaching and tasting first with friends and neighbors in her living room before expanding her business to Paris and online. She's also worked as the Director of Education at Chateau de Pomar for 3 years. And in 2022, Vanessa decided to focus her business and focus on her own business rather, and launched new spirits and sakes training, as well as selling wines, spirits, and sakes. Vanessa, you sound very busy indeed. I will hand over to you for the rest of the webinar. Everyone, I hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Sam. So I want indeed to thank the WSET. I'm really grateful to be here and to host this webinar. So thank you for the opportunity. As Sam said, indeed, I'm teaching in Marseille, in Paris, and we also provide the courses in wine, spirits, and sake online, mostly in France, but also for European customers and students. So I'm also very grateful to the WSET because it helped me to transition to the world of wine. In a previous life, in a previous career, I studied business and I've worked in electronics, in entertainment for more than 10 years in different countries, in France, but also in the US and in China. And at Weeno, we basically teach in French, but we also teach in English and from time to time, upon request, in Chinese. So today we will focus on Pinot Gris. And mostly this webinar is divided into 3 parts. So we'll first cover the key characteristics of Pinot Gris. Then we will go through the main regions where we can find Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio, and the different styles we find in these regions. And we will finish with a few suggestions for Pinot Gris food and wine pairing. So let's start with the key characteristics of Pinot Gris and a little bit of history. So Pinot Gris originated from Burgundy. It's actually a clone from Pinot Noir. Maybe you're more familiar with Pinot Noir as a red grape variety coming from Burgundy. And Pinot Gris, we will see, is a different clone with a different color. It has been spread across Europe, mostly around the Alps, thanks to the monks around the 14th and 15th century. So as a result, we can still find Pinot Gris in Switzerland, in Italy, in Germany, and then it has also spread across a little bit further away in Eastern Europe. And Pinot Gris has been famed for its capacity to produce age-worthy wines, sweet wines that were very popular in the 16th, 17th, 18th century. And thanks to that, it has been progressively planted around the world. So we will also see Pinot Gris in different countries around the world, like New Zealand, the USA, Canada, to name a few. So we can clearly say that Pinot Gris now is an international grape variety. And why do we call it Pinot Gris? So it's actually a clone of Pinot Noir, but with a different color. So here you see different grape varieties named Pinot. So the most famous is Pinot Noir, producing very delicate red fruit wine from Burgundy that are really age-worthy. Then we have Pinot Gris. So gris means in French literally gray, but as you can see from the picture, it's not exactly gray, it's more pinkish. And Pinot Gris is mostly producing white wine, but is also able to produce a rosé wine or orange wine, thanks to the color of its skin. And it's also famous in another name called Pinot Grigio. So that's its Italian name. We will dig into that right after this. And there is also Pinot Blanc. So it's a white grape variety producing white wine that we can find also around Europe. So Pinot Gris can have different names, but I just wanted to cover this because maybe you see different names on the label, but it's actually the same grape variety, Pinot Gris. So I start with the French name, Pinot Gris, with this bottle from Alsace, the traditional fruit. So here you can see clearly on the label Pinot Gris. But it's also very well known as Pinot Grigio in Italy. So here it's a Pinot Grigio coming from Veneto. In Germany, it has another name. It's called Grauburgunder. So Grau means gris, gray. So it's the same color, and Burgunder for its origin coming from Burgundy. So that's the label you can find in Germany. But you can also find some interesting other names, either old names or local names. So in Alsace, they used to call it Tokai Pinot Gris, as you can see in this older vintage. However, now it's banned because Tokai is now protected from Hungary, from the region of Tokai, as an appellation. So for new vintages in Alsace, you will not see Tokai anymore, but only Pinot Gris. In France and in Switzerland, you can also find sometimes Malvoisie, which can be actually another grape variety, but in some regions, it's Pinot Gris. So for example, here we have Malvoisie from Coteau d'Anceny, which is not far from Muscadet in the Loire Valley. But you can also find Malvoisie in Savoie and in Switzerland. And that would be actually Pinot Gris. So usually you find it on the label or on the back label. And sorry if we have Hungarian people participating, sorry for my pronunciation, but in Hungary, they call it Szürke-Báráty. That's how I can pronounce it. And that's just the local name for Pinot Gris in Hungary. So what are the key characteristics of Pinot Gris or Pinot Grigio? We'll just keep these two names because they are the most common. So it's a semi-aromatic grape. What does that mean? It's not as aromatic as Riesling or Sauvignon Blanc, which are very aromatic grapes on their own, but it's certainly more aromatic than Chardonnay. So we'll cover the different aromas we can find, but mostly not to cover the aromatic profile of Pinot Grigio. The wine are very unusually oaked. so it's usually unoaked. It's a grape that is adapted to cool to moderate climates. So you will see when we cover the region, we usually don't find Pinot Gris in hot climates. Why? Because it's early budding and early ripening. So it's prone to frost if it buds too early, but also because it's ripened quite fast, it's better to have a cool to moderate climate to slow down the ripening process and develop more aromas and flavors in the berries. So I told you it has been famed for its sweet wine, and you can still find a sweet Pinot Gris, so sometimes dry, sometimes sweet. And why? Because this grape is prone to botrytis. So what is botrytis? It's actually a fungus that is also called sometimes noble rot, a fungus that will cover the grapes, and basically all the berries will dry out and get very, very concentrated, which is ideal to produce sweet wines. In terms of quality level, you can find really simple Pinot Gris to outstanding quality level. So we will dig into that when we cover Pinot Gris in the different regions. So in terms of aromas and flavors, I first want to talk about Pinot Grigio, because actually I kept these two names for Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio and Pinot Gris, because when you see them on the label, it's also an indication of style. So Pinot Grigio, the name from Italy, is usually a simple wine with simple flavors of lemon, apple, pear. It's usually quite acidic, simple, refreshing, easy to drink, and perfect for seafood. Whereas Pinot Gris in Alsace is usually more complex, thanks to lower yields, warmer climate. You basically get more aromatics, riper fruits, so stone fruits, for example, or sometimes tropical fruits. And the wines in Alsace, Pinot Gris can be dry to sweet, whereas for Pinot Grigio, it's dry, simple. The wines, Pinot Gris in Alsace or elsewhere, if it's labeled Pinot Gris, can have capacity to age. So they will develop very interesting aromas and flavors such as honey, ginger, almond, and of course, if the wine is sweet, it really tends to be richer with more tropical fruits, banana, mango, but also rock melon. So it's really two different style of wine, or even more than two, but if you see Pinot Grigio, remember that it's dry, acidic, simple. If you see Pinot Gris, it can be dry to sweet, and it's usually more complex and a richer style. So Sam, maybe at this stage, before I move on to the regions, we can do questions.
Yeah, we haven't received any questions yet, but just as a reminder, everyone, if you do have any questions for Vanessa, please put them in the Q&A box, and we will answer them either slightly later in this webinar or towards the end. But we haven't received any just yet, so maybe we should continue. And
Okay.
one popping up.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll start with one here. So Tolga asks, can you give an example of two wines that could best show the difference between these two grapes? Any two sort of specific wines or producers, perhaps?
Yeah, so we will actually dig into that when we cover the different regions. But for example, Pinot Grigio from Veneto, della Venezia, the most typical, easy drinking, simple wine, usually produced in large volume, but very refreshing and easy to drink. And in opposition, here, for example, the label that we see here, it's a Pinot Gris vendange tardif. So it means it's a late harvest. So it will be probably medium sweet or sweet with more tropical flavors, more viscosity on the palate, more complexity. And depending on its age, if it's an old vintage, for example, you can have tertiary aromas, so aromas from that are coming with time, such as honey, ginger, and tropical fruits.
And then one more question from Nicola. If you could explain the difference between an aromatic and a non-aromatic grape variety. I know you mentioned that Pinot Gris is sort of semi-aromatic.
So basically, different grape varieties have different properties in the pulp and also in the skin. And most of the aromas are coming from the skin. Depending on that, some grape varieties tend to have a more aromatic precursor in their skin than others. So, for example, Riesling is really or Sauvignon Blanc are two grape varieties that have a lot of aromas, precursors in the skin that will be transformed thanks to the fermentation. Chardonnay, on the other side, tend to have less aromas, aroma precursors in their skin, and basically develop less aromas after fermentation. So then the producer will use different techniques to enhance the aromatic profile. And Pinot Gris is somewhere in between. So it's not super aromatic like other grapes, but yeah, semi-aromatic. A similar grape variety that could be semi-aromatic as well could be Chenin Blanc from the Loire Valley.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I know there are some more questions coming in, but I think we'll get to them a little bit later. Thank you very much, Vanessa.
Thank you. So I carry on with the different regions where we can find Pinot Gris. And we start in France. So we are in the northeast of France, in Alsace, at the border with Germany. So here you have a nice map of Alsace. So you can see that the vineyards are sitting on the hillside. Actually, Alsace enjoys a continental, temperate temperate climate. Used to be cool, but now it's more temperate and sometimes even warm. But still, the vineyards are on the hillsides to enhance the exposure to the sun and to make sure grapes are ripening as expected. In Alsace, you have different grape varieties. Pinot Gris is just one of them. And you have also a lot of different soils, volcanic soil, granitic soils, sands, etc. So you can actually find different style of Pinot Gris if they have been grown in different vineyards with different exposure and also different soils. Although we cannot exactly say, okay, if you have a volcanic soil, your Pinot Gris will have these properties. But it still changed the texture of the wine, the aromatic, but there is no scientific explanation to be more specific than that. In Alsace, we can find dry Pinot Gris. So that means that the fermentation has been complete, and usually harvests are done when the grapes are fully ripened. And then we can have a medium sweet to sweet styles when the grapes are late harvested or when the grapes are infected with botrytis, the noble rot. These two techniques allow the grapes to dry a little bit, so the water evaporates, and the aromatics, but also the acidity and the sweetness are more concentrated. In Alsace, there is no oak aging, meaning that you won't get oaky aromas and flavors in the wine, such as vanilla, coconut, toastiness. So the wines are sometimes aged in large old casks, but these casks are very old and do not give any flavor to the wine. Also, one thing in Alsace is you can find Grand Cru. So these are specific vineyards that have been classified as Grand Cru. And we aim to produce higher quality of Pinot Gris on these vineyards, on these locations. So just to give a few examples, here we have different labels that you can find on bottles coming from Alsace. So on the left-hand side here, you have a standard Pinot Gris from Alsace. So you can expect a dry wine, but quite complex with these aromas of stone fruits, maybe tropical fruits. Here on the second label, you can see it's Alsace Grand Cru. So actually in Alsace, you only have two appellations, Alsace and Alsace Grand Cru. And this gives you an indication in terms of quality. You can expect a better quality on Grand Cru, also better, longer capacity to age from Pinot Noir Grand Cru. And here it's a Grand Cru. You have the name of the Grand Cru, Sonnenglans. There are 51 Grand Cru in Alsace. And you see the grape variety. So there are only two appellations, but as I said, you have Pinot Gris and other grape varieties in Alsace. So you could find Riesling, for example, Muscat, or other grapes. And then on the one on the right-hand side, Pinot Gris Vendange Tardive. This is a mention informing you about the style of the wine. So Vendange Tardive means late harvest. So here we would expect a sweet wine, medium sweet to sweet wine. So very different style. And it's an Alsace, so a standard quality level. We could have an Alsace Grand Cru Vendange Tardive. So that's it for Alsace. Now going to Italy. So Italy is a very important country when it comes to Pinot Grigio. So now I'm going to call the grape Pinot Grigio because that's its name in Italy. And we can find it mostly in northeast Italy. Actually, it's the most. Pinot Grigio is the most planted white grape variety in Italy. And just these regions represent 40% of all Pinot Gris produced worldwide. So northeast Italy. So as I said earlier, here we will mostly find simple, dry, unoaked Pinot Grigio with a very refreshing acidity. And most of the volume are coming from that DOC, Pinot Grigio della Venetie. So it's coming from Veneto. So usually it's produced in large volume and these wines are really affordable. This being said, we also find good quality, interesting Pinot Grigio in Italy that are also able to age, mostly dry. And we can find them in Trentino Alto Adige here, in Friuli. And I want to focus on a specialty in Italy. They do Ramato style. What is it? As you can see from the bottle, the color is slightly different. It's not a standard dry white wine, as I was talking about for Pinot Grigio. Why? They will use a specific technique. So basically, they will macerate the skins with the juice for quite some times, can be a few hours to 1 or 2 days, to get this color, so light blush to salmon, and to extract more aromas and flavors from the skin. But because the period of maceration is quite short, you won't extract tannin. So in terms of texture and body, it's closer to a white wine, but you have a very specific aromatic. So most of the wines are still wines, as you can see here on the bottle on the left. So standard still wine, but this style is now getting more and more popular. So you can also find Pinot Grigio Ramato, also sparkling. And they will use the same method as Prosecco. So that's called Ramato. Then we also find Pinot Gris, so as Grauburgunder in Germany. It's actually the third most planted white grape variety in Germany after Riesling and Müller-Thurgau. You find dry to medium sweet style, or even sometimes sweet style Pinot Gris, Grauburgunder. And when it's really sweet, you can see on the label Ruländer. Basically, it's a name to qualify the style of the wine. So we can find mostly Pinot Gris or Grauburgunder in Rheinhessen, but also in Pfalz and in Baden. So as you can see, Baden is just across the border from Alsace. So there is a lot of Grauburgunder in that region. And in this region, sometimes they age the wine in new barrique. So it's usually unoaked, not to cover the flavors. But here, you can have wines that have longer aging potential because they have these secondary aromas such as vanilla, maybe some toastiness. And in Germany, we have wine from Pradikat and Grosses Gewächs. I will do a focus now. So Pradikat and the VDP. So it's a little bit complex. I won't be able to go into details, but I just wanted to mention the names here. You can see these names on bottles, and this will give you an indication of style. So that's the standard classification of wine in Germany. Cabinet, which could be dry or off-dry, and then Spätlese, which is the equivalent of late harvest. Auslese, Beerenauslese, and Trockenbeerenauslese, where usually you have grapes that are affected by noble rot, botrytis. So the more you go towards Beerenauslese, Trockenbeerenauslese, the more complexity you can expect and the more sweetness as well. However, now dry wine are more popular than sweet wines. So there is in Germany the VDP, which is a private association of winemakers, and they wanted to highlight wines that are dry, good quality Pinot Gris or Grauburgunder that are dry. And they created this term, Grosses Gewächs, which is similar to what we called Grand Cru in Alsace. So these wines are coming from specific plots that are more qualitative. So that's really in brief. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go into much details, but if you have questions, I will answer them in the end. Then we move to the New World because we can find Pinot Gris across the globe. One region where there is a lot of Pinot Gris is Oregon in the USA. So there is Pinot Noir mostly, but also Pinot Gris. It's a slightly different climate, temperate with oceanic influence. Usually we find Pinot Gris on more fertile soil. But it's losing a little bit of fame in that region in favor of Chardonnay. So more and more Pinot Gris are being uprooted in favor of Chardonnay, but they still produce Pinot Gris in usually dry and with a similar style that you can find in Alsace, dry style. There is also a lot of Pinot Gris in British Columbia. It's actually the first white grape variety, so the most planted grape variety in British Columbia. That region has a temperate to warm continental climate, I would say warmer than Alsace. They produce wine that are dry to off-dry, and they can use, in terms of names, Pinot Gris or Pinot Grigio. And that will give you an indication of the style. If you see Pinot Gris, then you can expect a wine with more complexity and richer. If you see Pinot Grigio, that would be simpler, more simple, refreshing, dry. And I'll finish with New Zealand. We also find Pinot Gris in New Zealand. It's the third most planted white grape variety after Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. We find Pinot Gris across New Zealand, but also mostly in the largest wine region. So in Marlborough, which is the largest wine region in New Zealand, and also in Hawke's Bay, Gisborne, here you can find Pinot Gris. They can be dry to medium dry, and they sometimes try to age the wine during winemaking on the lees. So the lees are the dead yeast. It gives more texture, a little bit more complexity, sometimes bready aromas. And they sometimes also age the wine in oak. So the aim here is really to give more complexity and capacity to age. So that's what I wanted to cover in terms of regions. I'm happy to answer questions, Sam, if there are any related to the regions.
Yeah, Vanessa, we're running just a little bit short on time, so I did just want to say that we might not have time to answer everyone's questions. If you do have any questions you'd like Vanessa to answer, please email them to events@wsetglobal.com. I know we'll put the URL, we'll put the email address in the chat as well. Vanessa, would you like to finish off with the food pairings?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
So that's just a few suggestions in terms of food pairing, but we covered many different style of Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio, and I tried to give a few examples for these different styles, but obviously it's not exhaustive. Pinot Gris can be paired with a lot of different food. So when it comes to Pinot Grigio, dry, simple style, of course, it's a perfect match with a seafood platter. Very refreshing, simple. That's what you want to enhance the flavors of seafood. But also steamed or grilled white fish, something that is simple. So it's good to match the simplicity of the wine with the simplicity of the dish. And it's also a good match with goat cheese. Goat cheese can be quite creamy, quite rich, and the acidity, the refreshing taste of Pinot Grigio can cut through this fat and be very refreshing. For Pinot Gris, so more the Alsace, the style from Alsace, richer, with a richer texture, more fruit. First, local pairing could be choucroute, sauerkraut. It's a specialty from Alsace. And as you can see, there are a lot of sausages, bacon, so it's quite greasy and it matches well with the texture of Pinot Gris, which is quite viscous. Also, another idea would be roasted chicken, any white meat, and also fish that are also quite fat, such as trout and salmon. For Ramato style, remember, it's the wine which has the skin maceration. You have more flavors and aromas, such as orange peel, melon, white flowers, but it's still very refreshing, dry. So to me, it would pair really well with sashimi and ceviche, which are also really tasteful. And dish in general rich in umami. So here you have umami in soya sauce. It's a Japanese flavor, but also on risotto with mushroom, you have a lot of umami with mushrooms and parmigiano, and that would be good with Ramato, which is quite rich, quite intense in terms of flavor. And surf and turf, it's usually difficult maybe to pair surf and turf because you have meat and you have fish with wine, but with a Ramato style, so a wine which is not exactly white but not red, it can be a good idea. And then finally, we've also seen Pinot Gris, Vendange Tardive, or Sélection de Grains Nobles, which is noble rot, so sweet style. Then, of course, it can go with desserts. I would suggest desserts with vanilla, honey, or ice cream. But it's also a good pairing with blue cheese. Yeah, so please enjoy it and try it yourself.
Vanessa, thank you so much. I do apologize, everyone. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through your questions, but please do email them to events@wsetglobal.com. Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you all for joining us. Please do respond to the feedback poll. It's very helpful. And of course, if you'd like to continue to learn more about drinks, we have some webinars coming up. On the 28th of May is an introduction to rum from Granada, followed by the introduction to Jamaican rum on the 11th of June. As a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and will be posted on our events hub on YouTube, and you will be sent an email when it has been upgraded. So it is left to me to wish you all a lovely morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. And we look forward to seeing you again at a webinar in the near future. Thank you, everyone. See you soon.